The city of Washington, D.C. slept under a clear autumn sky. Most people had gone to bed after watching the evening news, unaware that history was being made in the heart of their nation's capital. Inside the White House, the hallways were quiet except for the occasional footsteps of Secret Service agents making their rounds. Agent Diane Walker checked her watch as she walked the carpeted corridor leading to the Oval Office. It was nearly midnight and President Robert Hayes had asked not to be disturbed during his late meeting. Still, protocol required her to check the perimeter every 30 minutes. As she approached the heavy wooden doors, something felt wrong. The usual guard wasn't at his post. "Jenkins?" she called out, her hand instinctively moving toward her weapon. No answer. The silence hung heavy in the air. Walker pressed her earpiece and whispered, "Agent Walker reporting possible situation at Oval Office entrance. No visual on station personnel." "Copy that," came the immediate response. "Back up en route." "Wait for—" But Walker had already noticed something else. A thin streak of dark liquid seeping out from under the door. Her training kicked in and she drew her weapon in one fluid motion. "Security breach. I'm entering now." She pushed open the door with her shoulder, keeping her gun ready. The scene inside made her blood run cold. President Hayes lay sprawled across his desk, a dark stain spreading across his white shirt. The room showed signs of a struggle. Papers scattered, a lamp knocked over, the American flag stand toppled. "Code black. Code black," Walker shouted into her comm. "The Eagle is down. I repeat, Eagle is down." Within seconds, the White House erupted into controlled chaos. Security protocols activated throughout the building. Armed agents flooded the hallways, securing every entrance and exit. Medical staff rushed to the Oval Office, but their grim faces confirmed what Walker already knew. President Hayes was gone. Outside the White House gates, late-night tourists noticed the sudden increase in security vehicles, their blue and red lights flashing against the historic white facade. A few pulled out phones to record the unusual activity. Not yet understanding, they were documenting the beginning of a national tragedy. In a secure bunker beneath the White House, Vice President Thomas Clark was awakened by his security detail. The agents' faces told him everything before they even spoke. "Sir, there's been an incident. President Hayes has been—" The agent paused, struggling with the words. "Sir, the president has been assassinated." Clark sat motionless, the words hitting him like physical blows. After 23 seconds of heavy silence, he straightened his shoulders. "Get me the Joint Chiefs and the cabinet, and prepare for an emergency swearing-in." His voice was steady despite the shock. "The country cannot be without leadership, not even for a night." Across town, Press Secretary Allison Chen was pulled from a deep sleep by her ringing phone. As she listened to the news, her mind was already racing through the crisis communications plan they had all hoped would never be needed. "I'll be there in 15 minutes, she said, already pulling clothes from her closet. "Don't release anything until I arrive. The world needs to hear this the right way." Back at the White House, FBI Director Samuel Washington arrived, his face grim as agents briefed him in the Roosevelt room. The initial findings were troubling. No alarms were triggered, no unauthorized entries recorded. "All scheduled staff accounted for," reported the lead agent. "So we're looking at an inside job?" Washington asked, his experienced eyes scanning the security logs. "Or a massive security failure," added the chief of staff, Lawrence Reynolds, who hadn't left the building since the discovery. "But there's something else you need to see." Reynolds led them to the security office where technicians were reviewing footage. "We have a complete surveillance system covering every inch of this building, except—" he pointed to the monitor showing multiple camera feeds. "There's an 18-minute gap in the recordings. All cameras, right before the estimated time of death." Washington's expression darkened, just like another famous White House scandal. "But this is digital, not tape," a technician explained. "Someone would need highest-level clearance and exceptional skills to do this." As dawn approached, the White House medical examiner completed her preliminary examination. Single gunshot wound to the chest. Angle suggests the shooter was standing directly in front of him. The president likely knew his killer. In the residential quarters, First Lady Catherine Hayes sat still as stone while the White House physician offered sedatives she refused to take. "I need to be clear-headed," she said, her voice barely audible. "For Robert, for the country." Her personal assistant, Lily Thompson, sat beside her, holding her hand in silent support. They had been friends long before the Hayes family entered politics, and now Lily wondered how anyone could bear such a burden. Outside the White House gates, a small crowd had begun to gather as rumors spread through early morning news alerts. People stood in confused clusters checking their phones, some already laying flowers. At 5:18 a.m. in the cabinet room, Thomas Clark took the oath of office as the 47th President of the United States. The hastily assembled ceremony was solemn and brief, with only essential personnel present. The Chief Justice administered the oath with a Bible brought from the White House Library. "I will faithfully execute the office of President of the United States, and will to the best of my ability preserve, protect and defend the Constitution of the United States," Clark repeated, his voice gaining strength with each word. As the new day dawned, security agencies across the nation went on high alert. The Pentagon increased its readiness level. Stock markets worldwide prepared for inevitable turbulence. Foreign leaders were notified through secure channels, their responses of shock and condolence flowing in. In the Situation Room, newly sworn President Clark met with the National Security Council. "What do we know about potential threats? Foreign or domestic?" National Security Advisor Helen Wright shook her head. "No chatter on our usual channels. No organization claiming responsibility. This wasn't telegraphed. The American people deserve answers," Clark said, "and I want every resource we have dedicated to finding them." At 6:45 a.m., Press Secretary Chen stood before a hastily assembled press corps. Camera lights illuminated her exhausted face as she delivered the news that would shock the world. "It is with profound sorrow that I confirm President Robert Hayes was found deceased in the Oval Office shortly before midnight. Evidence indicates he was the victim of an assassination. Vice President Thomas Clark has been sworn in as president in accordance with the Constitution. A full investigation is underway." Her voice wavered slightly before steadying again. "This is a dark day for our nation, but America's institutions remain strong." As the sun rose fully over Washington, the flag above the White House was lowered to half-staff. Government buildings across the nation followed suit. Schools announced closures. Religious leaders called for prayer services. Television networks suspended regular programming for continuous coverage. Detective James Okonkwo of the D.C. Metropolitan Police stood at the perimeter of the White House grounds, watching federal agents come and go. Though this was clearly a federal case, local police were assisting with crowd control and outer perimeter security. "Never thought I'd see something like this in my lifetime," said his partner, Detective Maria Hernandez. "Not here," Okonkwo nodded silently. In his 20 years on the force, he'd seen plenty of violence, but this was different. This was a wound to the heart of the nation itself. Inside the White House, forensic teams methodically processed the Oval Office, documenting every detail, collecting every fiber and fingerprint. Agent Walker sat in a nearby office, giving her statement for the 5th time. "And you saw no one else in the vicinity when you approached the Oval Office?" asked the investigator. "No one," Walker confirmed, which is unusual. There should have been at least 2 agents posted. As morning turned to midday, the nation remained glued to news coverage. Political analysts speculated about motives and consequences. Historians drew parallels to past assassinations. Social media overflowed with theories and tributes. Little did anyone know that the true shock was yet to come. As the clock ticked toward afternoon, something impossible was about to happen. Something that would challenge everything the public thought they knew about this tragedy and about reality itself. The morning sun cast long shadows across the National Mall as the country woke to the devastating news. American flags everywhere had been lowered to half-staff, a visual reminder of the tragedy that had unfolded overnight. Streets that would normally buzz with morning commuters were eerily quiet, as many people chose to stay home, glued to their televisions for updates. Inside the White House, newly sworn-in President Clark sat alone in the Roosevelt Room, not yet ready to occupy the Oval Office where his predecessor had been killed just hours before. His untouched coffee grew cold as he reviewed the initial security briefings. No clear suspects, no obvious breach, just an 18-minute gap in surveillance and a dead president. "Sir," his Chief of Staff Patricia Wilson interrupted his thoughts. "The Joint Chiefs are assembled in the Situation Room." Clark nodded, straightening his tie. "Any developments I should know about before I face them?" "Nothing concrete," Wilson replied. But social media is becoming problematic. Conspiracy theories already? Clark sighed. More than usual, sir. And the crowds outside are growing. By 9:30 a.m., thousands had gathered around the White House perimeter. Some brought flowers and candles, creating makeshift memorials. Others simply stood in shocked silence. News vans lined the streets, reporters delivering somber updates with the iconic building as their backdrop. Among the crowd stood Michael Chen, a college student who had skipped his morning classes to be there. He held his phone up, live streaming the scene for friends. "It's surreal being here," he narrated quietly. "You can feel the weight of what's happened. Everyone's just—" He stopped mid-sentence, his attention caught by something over the fence. "Wait a minute. That can't be right." His camera shakily zoomed toward the rose garden, where a familiar figure appeared to be walking with several staff members. "Is that—" Michael's voice cracked with disbelief. "That looks exactly like President Hayes." A woman standing nearby overheard him and followed his gaze. "Oh my God," she gasped. "That's him. That's definitely him." Within minutes, dozens in the crowd had spotted the figure. Phones raised in unison, capturing video of what should have been impossible. The supposedly assassinated President Hayes, walking calmly through the White House grounds, very much alive. Inside the building, Agent Walker was debriefing security personnel when an aide burst into the room. "You need to see this," the young woman said, holding out her tablet. On the screen, social media was exploding with videos and photos of President Hayes in the Rose Garden. Walker's face drained of color. "This is some kind of sick joke. A deepfake." But even as she said it, her training told her something else was happening. She rushed to the nearest security monitor. Pulling up the live feed of the Rose Garden, there he was, President Robert Hayes, talking with White House gardeners as if nothing had happened. "Lock down the building," Walker ordered, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "No one approaches the president or whoever that is until we figure this out." In the Situation Room, the breaking news interrupted President Clark's meeting. Faces that had been grim with determination now showed open confusion as aides showed them the live footage. "Is this confirmed?" Clark demanded. "Has anyone made actual contact with whatever this is?" Before anyone could answer, the door opened. Standing there in the same blue suit he often wore for morning meetings was Robert Hayes. "Tom," he said to Clark, seemingly puzzled to find him leading the meeting. "What's going on here?" The room froze in collective shock. Secret Service agents moved instinctively, placing themselves between Clark and the newcomer, weapons half drawn. "Stand down," Clark ordered, his eyes never leaving Hayes's face. "Robert, is that really you?" Hayes looked genuinely confused. "Of course it's me. Why wouldn't it be?" Dr. Eleanor Rivera, the White House physician, pushed past stunned officials to approach Hayes. "Sir, I need to examine you immediately." "I'm fine, Eleanor," Hayes insisted. "Though everyone's acting very strangely this morning. My staff seemed shocked to see me, and now this." Rivera's professional demeanor slipped as she reached for Hayes's wrist to check his pulse. "Sir, according to my examination last night, you were deceased." Hayes laughed, though no one joined him. "That's absurd. I was working late in the Oval, then went to the residence for a few hours of sleep." News of the impossible development spread through the White House like wildfire. In the communications office, Press Secretary Chen tried desperately to manage the growing crisis. "We say nothing until we know something," she instructed her team. Not a word to the press. But outside, the news was already breaking. Amateur videos showing Hayes in the Rose Garden had gone viral. News networks interrupted their coverage of the assassination to report that the president appeared to be alive. Experts were hastily assembled to discuss body doubles, elaborate hoaxes, and even more bizarre possibilities. Back inside, First Lady Catherine Hayes was in her private sitting room when her assistant Lily rushed in. "Kate, you need to come with me right now," Lily said, her usual formality forgotten in the moment. "What is it?" Catherine asked, rising from her chair. She had been writing notes for her husband's funeral service. "Robert, Lily struggled for words. "He's here. He's alive." Catherine's face hardened. "That's not funny, Lily. I wouldn't joke about this. He's in the West Wing. Everyone's seen him." Catherine moved with sudden purpose, brushing past Lily and heading for the door. "Take me to him. Now." In a secured medical room, Dr. Rivera completed her examination of Hayes while Agent Walker and President Clark observed. The results defied explanation. This man had the same fingerprints, the same old shoulder injury, even the same small scar near his right eyebrow from a childhood accident, details known to very few. It's physically him, Rivera confirmed, her voice barely above a whisper. Down to the dental records and blood type. That's impossible, Walker insisted. I found his body myself. There was no pulse. Hayes sat patiently through this conversation, his initial amusement fading to concern. I assure you I'm very much alive, though I'm starting to worry about all of you. The door opened and Catherine Hayes entered. The room fell silent as she approached her husband, her eyes scanning his face with desperate intensity. Robert? Her voice trembled. Kate. He smiled warmly. Maybe you can explain why everyone's acting so. She cut him off by throwing her arms around him, holding him so tightly it seemed she feared he might vanish. They told me you were gone, she whispered. I saw your body. Hayes held his wife, looking over her shoulder at the others with growing alarm. Someone better start explaining what's happening. Director Washington of the FBI arrived minutes later, bringing with him the preliminary forensic reports from the Oval Office. The blood matched the president's DNA, he confirmed, and the body was positively identified by multiple staff members, including Dr. Rivera here. Yet I'm sitting right in front of you, Hayes said. Very much alive. Sir, Washington addressed Hayes directly. What's the last thing you remember before this morning? Hayes thought for a moment. I was working late. There was a call from the Secretary of State about the situation in Eastern Europe. Then I reviewed some briefing papers. He paused. Around midnight I felt tired and decided to get some sleep before today's meetings. Did you see anyone unusual? Notice anything strange? Walker pressed. No, Hayes said firmly. Then a flicker of doubt crossed his face. Although, there was a moment when the lights flickered. Just for a second, I thought it was nothing. In another room, technical experts were reviewing the security footage from both last night and this morning. Chief Technology Officer Daniel Wong pointed to the screen. Here's where it gets weird, he said. The 18-minute gap ends at 12:07 a.m. At 12:08 a.m. we have footage of the president's body being discovered by Agent Walker. He switched to another screen. And here, at 7:15 this morning, we have the president emerging from the residential quarters alive and well. There's no sign of tampering with this footage. Outside the White House, the crowd had swelled to unprecedented numbers. The mood had shifted from mourning to a mixture of confusion, hope, and fear. Some held signs asking, "What is the truth?" Others chanted for answers. Police struggled to maintain order as theories spread through the crowd like electricity. Back in the medical room, Catherine hadn't left her husband's side, her hand gripping his as if afraid he might disappear. We need to address the nation, Hayes said firmly. People deserve to know what's happening, even if we don't fully understand it ourselves. Clark, still technically the president, nodded slowly. The problem is we don't know what to tell them. We have two contradicting realities. Dr. Rivera, who had been quietly reviewing her notes, looked up suddenly. Actually, we need to consider a third possibility. All eyes turned to her. What if both realities are true? She suggested. What if President Hayes did die last night, and somehow he's also alive today? The room fell silent as the implications of her words sank in. Outside, the crowd continued to grow, their confusion mirroring that of those within the White House walls. Something unprecedented had happened, something that would force everyone to question what they thought possible. And as the day wore on, more strange details would emerge, leading to a revelation that would change not just American politics, but humanity's understanding of reality itself. By mid-afternoon, the White House had become the center of the most bizarre situation in American political history. Inside the building's secure conference room, an unprecedented meeting was taking place. Around a long wooden table sat both President Hayes and President Clark, along with the highest-ranking officials in national security, facing what seemed impossible, the same man, both dead and alive. The autopsy results are conclusive, Dr. Rivera said, placing a folder on the table. She looked directly at Hayes, her professional composure barely masking her disbelief. The body in the morgue is biologically identical to you, Mr. President, down to the childhood appendectomy scar and the dental work from your college years. Hayes shook his head. This doesn't make any sense. I'm sitting right here. And yet, FBI Director Washington added, We have irrefutable evidence that President Hayes was shot and killed in the Oval Office last night. The bullet, the blood evidence, the wound pattern, all documented and verified. National Security Advisor Joseph Lee, who had remained silent until now, cleared his throat. We need to consider all possibilities, no matter how unconventional. Meaning what exactly? Clark asked. Meaning, Lee continued, that we can't rule out scenarios beyond our current scientific understanding. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. It was First Lady Catherine who finally spoke, her voice steady despite the strain visible on her face. What Joseph is trying to say is that we might be dealing with something that sounds like science fiction. She squeezed her husband's hand. A duplicate, a clone, for something we don't even have a name for yet. Outside the White House gates, the situation was growing more chaotic by the hour. News helicopters circled overhead, capturing aerial footage of the crowds that had swelled to tens of thousands. Police had set up barricades, but people continued to arrive, drawn by the bizarre reports spreading across every news outlet and social media platform. Anna Patel, a network news reporter, stood at the edge of the crowd, speaking into her camera. The White House has yet to make an official statement, but sources confirm that someone appearing to be President Hayes has been seen inside the building today. This contradicts last night's reports of his assassination, leading to widespread speculation and confusion. Behind her, people held up signs with questions and theories. Some chanted for transparency. Others prayed. A few fringe groups had already decided it was all an elaborate government conspiracy. Back inside, Chief Technology Officer Wong had called for an urgent meeting with a smaller group that included both presidents, Agent Walker and Dr. Rivera. You need to see this, Wong said, setting up his laptop. We've been reviewing all security footage from the past week, looking for anything unusual. He played a video showing President Hayes in a rarely used sub-basement of the White House 3 days earlier. Hayes was speaking with two people, a woman in a lab coat and a man in military uniform. The conversation seemed intense. I don't remember this meeting, Hayes said, leaning forward to study the faces. Wong zoomed in on the woman's ID badge. It read, Dr. Lindsay Carter, Department of Energy, Project Mirror. Project Mirror? Clark asked. What is that? Hayes' expression changed subtly. It's classified. Beyond top secret. With all due respect, sir, Agent Walker interjected, I think we're past normal security protocols. If this Project Mirror has something to do with what's happening... Hayes seemed to struggle internally before responding. Project Mirror was initiated during the previous administration. It involves research into quantum physics, specifically, the theoretical possibility of parallel realities. The room went completely still. Are you saying, Dr. Rivera asked slowly, that the government has been researching parallel universes? Not just researching, Hayes admitted. The project made a breakthrough about 6 months ago. They proved they exist. In another part of the White House, Catherine Hayes sat alone in the residential quarters, looking through family photos. Her assistant, Lily, brought her tea. How are you holding up? Lily asked gently. Catherine touched a photo of her husband from their anniversary trip last year.
He's exactly the same, she said quietly.
His voice, his mannerisms, the way he looks at me. It's Robert in every way, but... Lily prompted, sensing her friend's hesitation. But last night I identified my husband's body. I saw the wound. I felt his cold hand. Catherine's voice broke slightly. How can both things be true? Meanwhile, in the secured medical facility within the White House, Dr. Rivera and a team of specialists were conducting more tests on President Hayes. Brain scans, blood work, DNA analysis, everything science could offer to solve the mystery. Your brain activity is normal, Dr. Rivera told Hayes as she removed monitoring equipment. No signs of any anomalies or manipulation. Did you expect to find something? Hayes asked. Rivera hesitated. Honestly, I don't know what to expect anymore. This defies everything I understand about human biology. Agent Walker entered the room, her face grave. Sir, we found something in the Oval Office. Something we missed in the initial investigation. She handed Hayes a small device no larger than a coin. It was hidden under your desk, embedded in the wood. It's unlike any technology our experts have seen before. Hayes examined the device carefully. Get me Dr. Carter from Project Mirror, immediately. Across town, at the heavily guarded Department of Energy research facility, Dr. Lindsay Carter was in the middle of shutting down her laboratory when her secure phone rang. "This is Carter," she answered. "Dr. Carter, this is Agent Walker with Secret Service. The president is asking for you." "Which one?" Carter asked, surprising Walker with her bluntness. "You know?" Walker managed to ask. "Not exactly," Carter replied, already gathering her things. "But I've been expecting this call since I heard the news this morning. I'll be there in 20 minutes. And Agent Walker, don't let either president make any public statements until I arrive." Back at the White House, the pressure to address the nation was mounting. Press Secretary Chen was fielding hundreds of calls from news organizations worldwide. Social media was overflowing with theories ranging from government cover-ups to alien intervention. The stock market had been suspended after an immediate drop threatened economic stability. President Clark paced in the Roosevelt Room. "We can't keep the country in the dark much longer. People are panicking. We can't tell them what we don't understand ourselves," Hayes countered. Once Dr. Carter arrives, he was interrupted by the White House Chief of Staff. "Sir, we have another problem. Vice President Olivia Turner is calling for an emergency cabinet meeting to invoke the 25th Amendment. Which would remove which one of us?" Hayes asked with grim humor. "Both, potentially," Clark answered. "The situation is unprecedented." Dr. Carter arrived at the White House through a secure underground entrance bypassing the crowds. She was immediately escorted to the conference room where both presidents waited. "Dr. Carter," Hayes greeted her. "I believe you have some explaining to do." Carter placed her briefcase on the table and looked between Hayes and Clark. "Before I begin, I need to confirm something." She turned to Hayes. "What was the last thing President Sandoval said to you before leaving office?" Hayes didn't hesitate. "Don't trust the system, trust the people. It was in the Oval Office, just the two of us." Carter nodded, then turned to Agent Walker. "The man you found dead last night, was he wearing a watch?" "Yes," Walker confirmed. "His usual one. Gold band, navy face. And you?" Carter asked Hayes directly. Hayes rolled up his sleeve to reveal a bare wrist. "I must have forgotten to put it on this morning." "You didn't," Carter said quietly. "Because in your reality, that watch was a gift you never received." She opened her briefcase and removed a thick folder stamped with Project Mirror Level Alpha across the front. "What I'm about to tell you will sound impossible," she began, "but the evidence is sitting right in front of us." Gestured between the two presidents. Project Mirror was established to investigate anomalies in quantum, fields that suggested the existence of parallel realities, versions of our world where history took slightly different paths. 6 months ago, we detected a way to observe these alternate realities. 2 months ago, we found a way to temporarily connect with them. The room was completely silent as she continued. Last night, at approximately 11:48 p.m., our monitoring systems detected a massive quantum disruption centered on the White House. We believe that for approximately 18 minutes, the exact duration of the security footage gap, a bridge formed between our reality and a parallel one. "Are you saying," President Clark asked slowly, "that this President Hayes is from another reality? A different universe?" "Yes," Carter confirmed. "And in his reality, he wasn't assassinated last night. But our President Hayes was." Hayes stood up abruptly. "This is absurd. I'm not from some parallel universe. I'm Robert Hayes. I've lived in this house for 3 years. I remember every day of my presidency." "Yes," Carter nodded. "You would. Because until the moment of divergence, until someone tried to assassinate you both, your lives were identical. Your memories would be the same." Catherine Hayes, who had quietly entered during Carter's explanation, approached her husband or the man who was identical to him. "This morning," she said softly, "I asked you what you gave me for our 20th anniversary." Hayes smiled. "A first edition of Pride and Prejudice, your favorite book." Catherine's eyes filled with tears. "Robert gave me pearls. He never knew about my love for Jane Austen. I only started reading her after he—" She couldn't finish the sentence. As the implications of this revelation began to sink in, the gathered officials realized they were facing not just a national crisis, but a fundamental shift in humanity's understanding of reality itself. The revelation that President Hayes was from a parallel reality sent shockwaves through the small group of officials now burdened with this impossible truth. They sat in stunned silence as Dr. Carter continued her explanation, her calm scientific demeanor contrasting with the earth-shattering implications of her words. The connection between realities is temporary, she said, checking data on her tablet. Based on our research, President Hayes can remain in our world for approximately 72 hours before quantum forces pull him back to his own reality. 3 days? Hayes looked stricken. I'm going to disappear in 3 days? Return, Carter corrected gently. You'll return to your world, where you're still the president, still alive, and everything is as you remember it. Catherine Hayes stood by the window, her back to the room. And our Robert stays dead, she said quietly. The weight of those words hung in the air. President Clark, who had been processing everything in silence, finally spoke. We need to decide what to tell the public, he said. There are thousands of people outside these gates demanding answers. Millions more watching at home. Agent Walker, ever practical, shook her head. We can't tell them the truth. The panic would be unimaginable. Not to mention, FBI Director Washington added, the national security implications. If foreign powers learned we had access to parallel world technology. Hayes stood up suddenly. No more secrets. That's what got us here in the first place. He looked around the room, his expression resolute. Project Mirror should never have been hidden from the American people. Scientific advancements of this magnitude belong to humanity, not to governments or agencies working in shadows. Sir, Chief of Staff Wilson protested, the public isn't ready for this kind of truth. They're more ready than you think, Hayes countered. Look outside. They've already seen the impossible with their own eyes. They deserve to know what it means. Outside the White House, as the afternoon stretched into evening, the crowd had transformed. What began as confusion had evolved into something closer to a vigil. People brought chairs and blankets, settling in for the night. Volunteers distributed water and food. Impromptu musical performances broke out in some areas. Despite the uncertainty, or perhaps because of it, a sense of community had formed. Among them was Ben Franklin, a physics teacher from a local high school, who found himself explaining quantum theory to a growing circle of listeners. Think of it like this, he said, using a napkin to draw parallel lines. Instead of one timeline of history, there could be countless versions, all existing simultaneously. In some tiny differences, maybe you chose cereal instead of toast for breakfast. In others, major changes. Different presidents, different wars, different technologies. And you think that's what's happening here? Asked an elderly woman. 2 timelines crossing? Ben nodded. It's the only explanation that fits what we're seeing. In one reality, the president died. In another, he lived, and somehow those realities have touched. His audience murmured with a mixture of wonder and unease. The idea was fantastical, yet strangely comforting. If true, it meant that somewhere in some reality lost loved ones still lived. Different choices could have led to different lives. The implications were both terrifying and hopeful. Back inside the White House, Dr. Carter had set up equipment in a secure room. President Hayes sat with sensors attached to his temples while Carter monitored readings. The quantum signature is clear, she explained to the others watching. He resonates at a slightly different frequency than our reality. It's subtle but measurable. Can you use this to determine exactly how his reality differs from ours? Dr. Rivera asked. Beyond the obvious fact that he survived the assassination attempt, Carter nodded. We're already seeing patterns, small divergences going back approximately 3 months, becoming more pronounced in recent weeks. Hayes, who had been quietly allowing the examination, spoke up. 3 months ago, I rejected a trade proposal from the European Union. It was a difficult decision, but I believed it wasn't in our country's best interest. Our president accepted that same proposal, Clark said, realization dawning. It was a major policy victory. That could be the point of divergence, Carter confirmed. One decision creating 2 different paths forward. Catherine, who had been watching from the doorway, approached Hayes. In your world, she asked hesitantly, am I still? Hayes's expression softened. Yes, we're still together. Still happy. He reached for her hand, then stopped himself. I'm sorry. This must be incredibly difficult for you. She nodded, fighting back tears. It's like seeing a ghost. Except you're not a ghost. You're him, but not him. Their conversation was interrupted when Press Secretary Chen entered urgently. Turn on the news, she said. Someone leaked information about Project Mirror. They gathered around a television as a news anchor reported. We're receiving unconfirmed reports that the bizarre situation at the White House involves a classified government project called Mirror. allegedly researching parallel universes. Officials have yet to comment on these rumors. How did this get out? Agent Walker demanded. It doesn't matter now, Hayes said firmly. It's time for the truth. He turned to Chen. Schedule a national address tonight. While preparations for the address began, two very different conversations were happening elsewhere. In the Pentagon's secure conference room, military leaders met with Vice President Turner. If this parallel world technology is real, General Richard Thompson said, we need to establish control immediately. The strategic advantages would be unprecedented. We could observe alternate outcomes of military actions before committing our own forces, another officer added. Turner raised her hand to stop them. Let's not get ahead of ourselves. First, we need to establish clear chain of command. This situation with two presidents is untenable. Meanwhile, in Dr. Carter's lab at the Department of Energy, her team was making a disturbing discovery. The quantum bridge isn't closing, Dr. Paul Richards, Carter's colleague, explained over the secure phone line. Based on the readings we're getting, the connection between realities is actually strengthening. That's not possible, Carter replied, stepping away from the others to take the call. Our models showed temporary alignment only. The models were wrong, Richards said grimly. And there's something else. We're detecting additional quantum signatures, not just two realities in contact, but potentially more. Carter felt a chill run down her spine. Are you saying we could have more visitors? More versions of the president or others crossing over? I'm saying the boundaries between realities are becoming dangerously thin, and we don't know how to fix it. As evening fell, the White House staff transformed the East Room for the presidential address. Lights were set up, cameras positioned, and teleprompters loaded with what would surely be the most extraordinary speech in American history. Hayes stood before a mirror, straightening his tie. President Clark approached him. Are you sure about this? Clark asked. No, Hayes admitted, but I'm sure that keeping the secret is wrong. You realize what this means for both of us, Clark said. For the country, Hayes nodded. The Constitution never anticipated two legitimate presidents. We're in uncharted territory. If you do this, Clark warned, there's no going back. Not for you, not for me, not for anyone. Some truths are too important to hide, Hayes replied, even when they're inconvenient, especially then. Outside, the crowd had grown to unprecedented size. The National Guard had been called in to help maintain order, though the gathering remained largely peaceful. The mood was one of anticipation rather than anger, a collective holding of breath as people waited for answers. News of the upcoming address had spread quickly. Television networks had cleared their evening schedules. Social media platforms struggled under the weight of global attention. In living rooms across America and around the world, people gathered to witness history. Inside the White House, final preparations were underway when Agent Walker received an urgent security alert. She rushed to find Hayes and Clark. Sir, she addressed them both, her training not allowing her to distinguish between the two presidents. We have a situation. Our sensors are detecting unusual energy readings throughout the building, similar to what Dr. Carter described from the quantum bridge. Meaning what exactly? Clark asked. Meaning, Dr. Carter said, hurrying into the room with her equipment. The barrier between realities is getting thinner, and it's not just your reality and President Hayes's anymore. She showed them her tablet, where multiple waveforms pulsed in different patterns. We're detecting at least 5 distinct quantum signatures now. 5 different realities connecting with ours? Hayes asked, the implications dawning on him. Carter nodded grimly. And the connections are growing stronger by the minute. Before anyone could respond, a young aide burst into the room, her face pale with shock. Sir, she said, looking between Hayes and Clark in confusion before continuing, there's someone else here. Someone who says he's President Hayes too. The White House, once a symbol of stability and order, had become the epicenter of reality itself breaking down. In the Blue Room, 3 identical men who were all President Robert Hayes stood facing each other, a sight that defied everything the gathered officials thought they understood about the world. This is impossible, whispered Chief of Staff Wilson, voicing what everyone was thinking. Dr. Carter moved methodically between the 3 presidents, scanning each with her quantum detection device. Each one is registering a different quantum signature, she confirmed. They're all President Hayes, just from 3 different realities. The Hayes they had come to know, the one who had appeared that morning, looked at his counterparts with a mixture of fascination and unease. "What happened in your worlds?" he asked them directly. The second Hayes, dressed in a slightly darker suit with a red tie, answered first. "In my reality, I survived the assassination attempt but resigned the presidency this morning after learning about Project Mirror. The public deserved to know the truth." The third Hayes, who wore a military-style bandage on his left hand, shook his head. "In my world, I not only survived but caught the assassin. It was Vice President Clark." He looked pointedly at Clark, who stepped back in shock. "He was working with foreign operatives who wanted to stop our breakthrough with Project Mirror." "That's absurd," Clark protested. "I would never— In your reality, perhaps not," the third Hayes interrupted. "But in mine, we found irrefutable evidence." Before the argument could escalate, Agent Walker cut in. "Dr. Carter, what's happening here? Why are more versions of the president appearing?" Carter studied her readings with growing concern. "The quantum bridge isn't just staying open, it's expanding. The barriers between realities are collapsing at an accelerating rate." "Can it be stopped?" the first Hayes asked. "Theoretically, yes," Carter replied. "But we'd need to create a quantum resonance pulse calibrated precisely to our reality's frequency. It would reinforce our universe's quantum signature and push the others back to their own realities." "And how do we do that?" Agent Walker pressed. "We'd need to use the original Project Mirror equipment at the Department of Energy lab. It has to be done from the source point of the initial breakthrough." Carter looked troubled. "But even if we succeed, there's a complication." "Of course there is," Clark said grimly. "Once we close the bridge, anyone not from our reality will be instantly pulled back to their own world. All three President Hayes would return to their respective realities." Catherine Hayes, who had been silently watching this impossible conversation, stepped forward. "Including my husband? The one who arrived this morning?" Carter nodded sympathetically. "Yes. He would return to his world where he survived the assassination." Catherine's eyes filled with tears. "So I lose him all over again." Outside the White House, the situation was growing more chaotic. Word had spread about multiple presidents being inside, fueling wild speculation. The crowd, now numbering in the hundreds of thousands, stretched from the White House gates all the way to the Washington Monument. Police barricades were straining to maintain order as people pushed forward, hoping to witness history. News helicopters circled overhead, broadcasting live footage of the unprecedented gathering. Across America and around the world, people remained glued to their screens, waiting for answers. In homes, bars, airports, and public squares, the same conversations were happening. Was this real? Were parallel worlds actually connecting? What did it mean for humanity's understanding of reality? Back inside the White House, an emergency meeting was convened in the Situation Room. The three Hayes sat side by side, with President Clark, Dr. Carter, and key officials around the table. "We need to act quickly," Carter urged. "My team at the lab reports that the quantum signatures from at least 12 different realities are now detectable. Soon we could have visitors from all of them." 12 versions of me?" the first Hayes asked, looking disturbed by the thought. "Not just you," Carter explained. "As the barriers weaken, anyone or anything near a thin point between realities could cross over. We're already getting reports of anomalies across Washington. People encountering other versions of themselves, objects appearing and disappearing, buildings momentarily shifting to different architectural styles." FBI Director Washington confirmed this with a grim nod. 3 agents reported seeing the Capitol building briefly transform into a pyramid-like structure before returning to normal. "We have dozens of similar reports coming in. We need to get to your lab," the first Hayes decided. "Now." "Wait," Clark interrupted. "We still haven't addressed the immediate crisis. The public needs answers. We were about to give a national address when all this happened." The 3 Hayes looked at each other, then the first one spoke. "We'll still do it, together. Show the American people exactly what's happening. Then we'll go to the lab." "That's insane," Agent Walker protested. "The panic it would cause is already happening," the second Hayes countered. "Look outside. People know something unprecedented is occurring. Hiding it will only make things worse." 20 minutes later, in a scene that would forever change human history, 3 identical presidents stood side by side before the cameras in the East Room. Behind them, Dr. Carter had set up equipment that visually displayed the different quantum signatures of each man. providing scientific proof of their separate origins. President Clark introduced them briefly, his voice steady despite the extraordinary circumstances. Then the first haze stepped forward to speak. My fellow Americans, and indeed all citizens of Earth watching around the world. Tonight we stand at a moment unlike any in human history. The barriers between parallel realities, between different versions of our world, have temporarily broken down. He gestured to his counterparts. We are all President Robert Hayes. We all lived identical lives until 3 months ago, when different decisions led our realities to diverge on separate paths. The second haze continued seamlessly. Project Mirror, a classified research program studying quantum physics, accidentally created a bridge between our worlds. That bridge is now expanding, allowing people and things from different realities to cross over. The third haze completed their message. We are working to restore the proper separation between our worlds before permanent damage occurs. But we wanted you to hear the truth directly from us. This is not a hoax, not a trick of technology, but a genuine breakthrough moment for humanity. As they spoke, viewers around the world witnessed something remarkable: the subtle differences between the three identical men. The way they moved, their speech patterns, even their reactions to each other revealed that they were indeed separate individuals with shared but divergent experiences. After the unprecedented address, preparations moved quickly. The three Hays, along with Dr. Carter, Agent Walker, and a small team of scientists prepared to travel to the Department of Energy laboratory, where Project Mirror was housed. Before leaving, the first Hays, the one who had appeared that morning, sought out Catherine. "I know you've already said goodbye to your Robert," he said gently. "And now you have to watch me leave too." Catherine took his hand. "In your world, your Catherine still has you. I find some comfort in that. When I go back," he promised, "I'll make sure Project Mirror is revealed to the public properly. No more secrets. It's too important for humanity." She nodded. "Our Robert would have done the same." After a moment's hesitation, she added, "In your world, tell your Catherine about Jane Austen. She might surprise you." The journey to the laboratory was tense. Reports came in of more reality breaches across the city. A neighborhood where it was suddenly snowing in summer. A park where dinosaur-like creatures had briefly appeared before vanishing. Street signs changing languages and then changing back. At the laboratory, Dr. Carter's team had prepared the quantum resonance equipment. "Once we activate this," she explained to the three presidents, "it will strengthen the quantum signature of our reality and push everything back to where it belongs." "How long do we have?" the first Hayes asked. "Minutes at most," Carter replied. "Once the process starts, the realities will begin separating immediately." The three Hayes looked at each other. These men who were the same person yet had lived increasingly different lives. "In my world," the first Hayes said, "I'll make sure this technology is used responsibly. For communication between realities, for sharing knowledge, not for exploitation." "In mine as well," the second agreed. The third Hayes nodded solemnly. "Despite our differences, it seems we still share the same core values." With final preparations complete, Dr. Carter began the countdown. "Initiating quantum resonance in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. She pressed the activation button. Immediately, a wave of energy pulsed outward from the equipment. The three Hayes felt it first, a pulling sensation, as if their very atoms were being tugged in different directions. "It's working," Carter confirmed, watching her readings. "The realities are separating." The second and third Hayes began to fade slightly, becoming transparent. The first Hayes, the one who had appeared that morning after the assassination, looked at his hands as they too began to lose solidity. "Tell your world what you've seen," he said to Carter and the others from this reality. "Tell them that we're not alone, that every choice creates new possibilities, that somewhere, in another reality, things might be different, but people remain the same at heart." As he spoke these final words, all three versions of President Hayes vanished completely. Throughout Washington, D.C., the reality breaches began to close. The snow disappeared. Buildings returned to their proper form. The world stabilized.